Irina Selivanova, a 24-year-old journalism student from Voronezh, received a certificate as the winner of the Arab cultural reality show, Women of Culture. 72 hours later, her body, with broken ribs and signs of rape, was dumped in a dry riverbed in Bahrain. Irina Selivanova applied to participate in the casting of the Al Mazaya Media Company in February 2023 through an advertisement on social media. The project was positioned as an educational program for young women with prize money and cultural trips to the Persian Gulf countries. The organizers promised participants an introduction to Arab culture, language practice, and the opportunity to receive a scholarship to study at universities in the United Arab Emirates. The casting took place in 3 stages. First, the girls filled out a questionnaire with personal data, photos, and information about their families. The second stage required them to record a video in Arabic or English about their interests and plans. The final selection included a video interview with representatives of the jury. Irina passed all 3 stages and in March received an invitation to Bahrain to film the final. Selivanova studied Arabic at the journalism department of Voronezh State University. Her teachers described her as a capable student with good academic performance. Irina was planning a career as an international correspondent and saw participation in the TV show as an opportunity to gain work experience in Arab countries. Her parents supported their daughter's decision, despite her mother's concerns about traveling to the Middle East. In April, Irina received plane tickets, a visa, and a detailed itinerary for her stay in Bahrain from the organizers. According to the documents, the participants were to spend 10 days in the country. The first 5 days were set aside for rehearsals and preparation for the final broadcast, the next 3 days for filming, and the last 2 days were planned as free time to get to know the country. On April 21st, Irina flew from Moscow to Manama on a Gulf Air flight. She was met at the airport in Bahrain by Mustafa Saeed al-Zahrani, a representative of Al Mazaya Media, who accompanied a group of 8 contestants from different countries. The girls were accommodated at the city center residence hotel in the business district of Manama. The first few days of their stay went according to plan. The contestants visited cultural sites, learned about local traditions, and prepared for the competition tasks. Irina regularly called her parents and shared her impressions on social media. In the photos, she looked happy and excited about what was happening. The final broadcast was filmed on May 24th in the pavilion of the Bahrain TV television company. The competition program included tasks on knowledge of Arab culture, improvisation in Arabic, and presentation of projects on intercultural dialogue. The jury consisted of 5 people, including Sheikh Salman ibn Fahd al-Munawir, who was introduced as a businessman and philanthropist who funds educational projects. Irina took first place with her project on the role of women in modern Arab journalism. Her presentation was highly praised for the depth of her research and the quality of her delivery. At the award ceremony, she was presented with a certificate, a gold bracelet with Arabic calligraphy, and an additional prize, a trip to Abu Dhabi for a cultural weekend. After filming ended, Sheikh Salman personally congratulated Irina on her victory and invited her to dinner to discuss the details of the trip to the Emirates. The organizers announced that the transfer would be arranged separately, and the other participants would go to the airport to fly home. Irina said goodbye to the other girls and got into a car with Mustafa al-Zahrani. According to the testimony of the taxi driver, who later gave evidence at the consulate, at around 9 p.m. on May 24th, a black Mercedes C-Class with tinted windows was driving through the Al Adliya district towards the suburbs. The car contained a man of Arab appearance at the wheel and a young woman of European appearance in the back seat. On the morning of May 25th, Irina was supposed to contact her parents, but no call came. Attempts to call her number were unsuccessful. Selivanova's mother contacted the Russian consulate in Manama with a request to find out her daughter's whereabouts. Consulate officials sent a request to the organizers of the TV show and received a reply that Irina was on an excursion program and would be back in touch in a few days. On May 26th, her parents received a message from Irina's phone. "Everything is fine. The program has been extended. I'll be back on Sunday." The text was written in Russian, but her parents noticed spelling mistakes and an unusual style of writing that were uncharacteristic of their daughter. Repeated attempts to contact Irina were unsuccessful. On May 7th, around midnight, Irina sent a voice message to her friend Marina Stepanova via a messaging app. The recording lasted 37 seconds. In the message, Irina said in an alarmed voice that she had been taken to a private house, which they called a vacation home. She mentioned 3 security guards, the confiscation of phones under the pretext of compliance with the rules, and the absence of the promised excursions. The message ended with the phrase that she did not understand what was happening. Stepanova immediately tried to call Irina back, but the number was unavailable. She contacted Selivanova's parents and sent them the voice recording. The family contacted the Russian consulate with a request to immediately search for their daughter and provided the audio recording as evidence that Irina was in danger. On May 8th, the consulate sent an official request to the Bahraini Ministry of Interior asking for a search for Russian citizen Irina Selivanova. The response, received 2 days later, stated that the citizen had left the country on May 7th on a flight to Dubai, and her further whereabouts were unknown. A check of airline records showed that no one named Irina Selivanova had registered for flights from Bahrain on May 7th. The consulate requested border control data, but received a formal response stating that the information was confidential and could not be provided to foreign missions without a court order. On May 10th, at around 6 a.m., a local resident named Ahmed al-Bouasheri, who was collecting scrap metal in the Al-Jaid area, discovered the body of a young woman in a dry riverbed. The previous evening, heavy rain had fallen in the region, washing the body out of the sand and onto the surface. The man called the police, and an investigation team arrived at the scene. The body belonged to a young woman of European appearance, aged about 25. The deceased was wearing a white cotton tunic with no identifying marks, no underwear, and no shoes. Her hair was tangled and contained traces of sand and vegetation. Multiple injuries were found on the body, including bruises on the face and limbs. A preliminary examination showed signs of violent death. The face was severely swollen, the nose was broken, and the lips were smashed. There were marks on the neck that resembled fingerprints. The hands had defensive wounds on the palms and forearms. The chest was deformed, indicating rib fractures. The right ankle was bent unnaturally. There were no documents on the body. The police photographed the deceased and sent the photos to missing persons databases. The body was transported to the morgue of the private clinic Al-Nasim Medical Center for a forensic medical examination. Since the state morgue was overloaded, the authorities regularly used private medical facilities for such procedures. 2 days later, the Russian consulate received a request to identify the body of an unknown woman of European appearance. Consular officer Andrei Volkov arrived at the clinic and immediately suspected that the deceased might be Irina Selivanova. Despite the damage, her facial features and physique matched the description of the missing girl. For accurate identification, fingerprints were taken and sent to the Russian database. The results came back a day later. The fingerprints matched those of Irina Selivanova, as recorded when she applied for her passport. The consulate immediately notified her parents of the tragic discovery and demanded that the Bahraini authorities conduct a full investigation into the circumstances of her death. A forensic medical examination conducted by Dr. Khalid Al-Manouri at the Al-Nasim Medical Center revealed multiple injuries incompatible with an accident. The report contained a detailed description of the injuries sustained by the deceased shortly before her death. The closed head injury was the result of multiple blows to the head with a blunt object. Internal bleeding in the abdominal cavity was caused by a ruptured spleen from a severe blow to the abdomen. The rib fractures were compressive in nature. indicating that significant force had been applied to the chest. According to the expert, the broken ankle could have been the result of a fall or intentional injury. The report paid particular attention to marks on the neck and wrists, which the expert interpreted as the result of the victim being restrained against her will. Abrasions on the inner thighs and damage to the genitals clearly indicated sexual assault. Blood tests revealed no traces of alcohol or drugs. The expert determined the time of death to be between late evening on May 7th and early morning on May 8th. The condition of the body indicated that death did not occur at the site where it was found. The absence of blood at the site and the nature of the damage to the clothing suggested that the body had been moved after death. The Russian consulate sent an official note of protest to the Bahraini authorities, demanding that a criminal case be opened into the murder of a Russian citizen. In its response, the Bahraini Ministry of Interior reported that a preliminary investigation had been launched under the leadership of Major Farid al-Khalifa from the Special Cases Department. At the same time, consular officials began their own investigation, interviewing television show employees and people who may have seen Irina in the last days of her life. Most officials refused to testify without permission from their superiors. Nevertheless, some information was obtained from rank-and-file employees. Ibrahim al-Kawari, a security guard at the television studio, confirmed that after filming, Irina was picked up by Mustafa al-Zarani in a black car. According to the guard, the girl looked calm and showed no signs of anxiety. Al-Zarani said he was taking the winner to a meeting with the program's sponsors to discuss a trip to Abu Dhabi. Fatima al-Zaira, the administrator of the city center residence hotel, said that Irina did not return to her room after the filming of the final. Her belongings remained in the room until the date of checkout. When consular officials requested the girl's personal belongings, it turned out that her suitcase and documents had disappeared from the room under unknown circumstances. Taxi driver Yusuf al-Majid said that on the evening of the final, he saw a black Mercedes with a young woman in the back seat in an area of luxury villas on the outskirts of Manama. The car was heading towards a suburban area where the private residences of influential citizens of the country were located. The driver did not remember the license plate number. Attempts to contact Mustafa al-Zarani were unsuccessful. Al-Mazaya media employees said that he went on vacation immediately after filming ended and left the country. The company's management provided a copy of his employment contract, but the contact information turned out to be inaccurate. The address listed belonged to a demolished building. Unofficial sources at the consulate received information that Irina had been seen in the area of the villa belonging to Sheikh Salman ibn Fahd al-Munawir. The residence was located in the gated community of Al Jazeera Gardens, home to members of the royal family and prominent businessmen. Access to the area was restricted, and the perimeter was guarded by a private security service. A kitchen employee at the villa, a Filipino citizen named Maria Jose, who worked at Sheikh Salman's house on a temporary contract, agreed to testify on condition of anonymity. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location through intermediaries from the Filipino diaspora, who guaranteed the woman's safety. According to Maria, in the evening, she saw a young European woman in white clothes in the guest wing of the villa. The girl looked confused and was trying to find a way out of the house. She was accompanied by two men in dark clothes who did not allow her to move freely around the property. One of them spoke English with an accent and called the girl Russian. At night, Maria heard loud voices and sounds of a struggle coming from the guest wing. A woman was screaming, her voice full of panic and pain. The sounds continued for about an hour. Then silence fell. The Filipina did not dare to leave her room, fearing for her own safety. In the morning, she saw two men carrying a large bundle wrapped in a carpet out of the house. The bundle was loaded into a white Toyota Land Cruiser with no license plates. The car left the villa grounds accompanied by another car, a black SUV with tinted windows. Maria remembered the time, around 8 a.m. because that was when she usually started making breakfast for the owners of the house. On the same day, Maria was notified of the early termination of her contract at the initiative of her employer. She was paid compensation and asked to leave the country within 48 hours. The woman realized that she had become an unwanted witness and agreed to deportation, fearing for her life. Consular officials attempted to obtain an official statement from Maria Jose, but by that time, she was already in Manila. Attempts to contact her through the Philippine consulate were unsuccessful. The woman refused to testify, citing threats to her family's safety. The Russian side sent a request to question Sheikh Salman ibn Fahd al-Munawir as a witness, as he was the last officially confirmed person to have had contact with the deceased. The response came a week later. The sheikh was on a business trip to Europe and would only be available to testify in a month's time. Meanwhile, the Bahraini authorities continued to insist on the accident version. Major al-Khalifa, who was in charge of the investigation, told reporters that the foreign citizen could have been the victim of a robbery that ended tragically. According to him, criminal groups regularly operated in the area where the body was found, attacking tourists. The Russian consulate requested the investigation materials, but was refused on the grounds of the confidentiality of the investigation. Consul Vladimir Petrov personally met with the Bahraini Minister of Interior, but no constructive dialogue was achieved. The Bahraini side continued to assert that the investigation was being conducted in full. Attempts to involve international human rights organizations also failed. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch expressed concern about the situation, but did not take any active measures, citing the need to obtain additional information from official sources. The Russian media provided virtually no coverage of the Irina Selivanova case. The few publications that did appear were only in regional publications in the Voronezh region, and even then, they were more in the form of obituaries than journalistic investigations. Federal channels ignored the story, despite appeals from parents and social activists. Irina's parents tried to draw attention to the case through social media, but their posts received limited distribution. The girl's mother, Elena Selivanova, created a petition demanding a thorough investigation into her daughter's murder, but collected less than 1,000 signatures. Her father, Vladimir Selivanov, appealed to various authorities, including the Russian Investigative Committee, but received only formal replies. Additional medical data obtained by the consulate through unofficial channels revealed horrific details about the last hours of Irina's life. Dr. Al-Manouri, who performed the autopsy, shared details in a private conversation with the Russian medical attaché that were not included in the official report at the request of local authorities. The nature of the injuries indicated prolonged torture. More than 30 separate bruises of varying ages were found on the victim's body, indicating systematic beatings over several days. The oldest bruises on her shoulders and back had a yellow-green hue, corresponding to 3 to 4 days before her death. The fractures of the nose and cheekbone were consistent with targeted blows. The medical expert determined that the blows were delivered with great force, probably by a person who was significantly larger than the victim. The marks on her face indicated that Irina was beaten while lying on her back, as evidenced by the nature of the bruises. The injuries to her hands indicated that the girl had tried to defend herself. The defensive wounds on her palms and forearms were deep, some reaching the bone. Particles of skin and blood were found under her fingernails, belonging not to the victim, but to her attackers. DNA analysis of these samples could have identified the perpetrators, but the Bahraini authorities refused to conduct such an investigation. The perpetrators showed particular cruelty in inflicting injuries to the chest. The broken ribs formed a characteristic pattern, indicating that the victim's chest had been stomped on. 3 ribs were broken in 2 places each, which could only have happened under extreme force. One of the fragments damaged the lung, causing internal bleeding. The spleen rupture was caused by a severe blow to the abdomen, probably with a knee. The intra-abdominal bleeding was so profuse that it was the immediate cause of death. The The expert assessed the force of the blow as sufficient to kill a healthy person within half an hour without medical attention. The sexual assault was gang rape. Damage to the genitals indicated that several men were involved in the crime. Abrasions and bruises on the thighs indicated that the victim was held down by force. The absence of seminal fluid indicated either the use of contraception or thorough cleaning of the body after the crime. Marks on the neck indicated attempts at strangulation. The fingerprints were so clear that they made it possible to determine the size of the attacker's hands. At least 2 of them had large hands, corresponding to men of above average height. The strangulation was not completed. Death occurred earlier from internal bleeding. Analysis of the stomach contents showed that the last meal was eaten 8 to 10 hours before death. Irina had eaten rice with vegetables and drunk water. The absence of alcohol or drugs ruled out the possibility that the victim was in an altered state of consciousness. She was fully conscious during the torture and murder. The condition of her clothes added to the picture of what happened. Her white tunic was torn in several places, and the nature of the tears indicated that the fabric had been torn with great force by hand. Traces of semen were found on the clothing, despite obvious attempts to clean it. Fibers from an expensive carpet and particles of sand, characteristic of the Persian Gulf coast, were also found. The underwear was completely missing. The expert suggested that it had been removed from the body and destroyed, as it could have contained the most important evidence. The absence of shoes also indicated an attempt to hide traces of the crime. The soles of the shoes could have retained dust from the room where the murder took place. The body's temperature and degree of decomposition made it possible to determine the exact time of death. Irina died between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning. The body was kept in a cool room for about 6 hours after death and then moved to a hot place. This was consistent with the theory that the murder took place in the house and the body was taken away in the morning. The absence of drag marks on the sand or asphalt indicated that the body had been transported by car directly to the dumping site. The nature of the damage to the clothing from contact with the ground showed that the body had been dropped from a height of about 1 meter, probably from the back of a truck or a tall SUV. The forensic doctor noted that the victim fought until the very last moment. This was evidenced not only by defensive wounds, but also by the nature of the bruises. Irina tried to get up after falling, turned to avoid blows, and covered her head with her hands. The criminals methodically broke her resistance by striking her limbs to prevent her from moving. The killers showed particular cruelty in that they did not rush. The intervals between inflicting various injuries ranged from several minutes to half an hour. This indicated either the sadistic tendencies of the criminals or attempts to extract some information from the victim. The nature of some of the blows suggested that Irina was being forced to do something. Blood tests showed high levels of adrenaline and cortisol, confirming the extreme stress and fear experienced by the victim. These levels were several times higher than normal, even for extreme situations. The girl realized she was being killed and fought for her life until the very end. Microscopic analysis of particles under her fingernails revealed fragments of expensive fabrics, silk, and cashmere. This indicated that the attackers were dressed in high-quality clothing, which did not correspond to the version of a domestic robbery. Particles of gold were also found, possibly from jewelry that Irina had tried to snatch from her attackers. The condition of the victim's hair indicated that she had been dragged by it. Multiple hair breaks at the roots, abrasions on the scalp, and torn clumps of hair indicated that this was one of the ways in which pain was inflicted. Particles of expensive marble, used to decorate the floors of elite homes, were also found in the hair. Post-mortem injuries were minimal, indicating that the body had been handled with care after death. This contradicted the version of events suggesting that the criminals had panicked and indicated that they were experienced in covering up traces of their crimes. The body had been thoroughly washed, but traces of blood remained in the ear canals and between the toes. Russian experts, who obtained copies of medical documents through unofficial channels, concluded that the murder was ritualistic or demonstrative in nature. The degree of cruelty exceeded what was necessary to take a life and pointed to the psychological abnormalities of the criminals or their desire to send a message to other potential victims. Dr. Al-Manouri admitted in a private conversation that in his 30 years as a forensic expert, he had never seen such cruel treatment of a victim. According to him, even crimes motivated by drugs or family revenge were rarely accompanied by such a level of violence. He expressed regret that political considerations prevented a full investigation. A month after the body was found, Sheikh Salman ibn Fahd al-Munawir returned from a trip to Europe and agreed to testify. The meeting took place at his law office in the presence of 3 lawyers and a representative of the Bahraini Ministry of Interior. Russian consular officials were allowed to attend, but without the right to ask questions. The sheikh claimed that he had last seen Irina at the award ceremony, where he congratulated her on her victory. According to him, he offered her an additional trip to Abu Dhabi as a sponsor of an educational program, but no specific agreements were reached. All further organizational issues were to be decided by the coordinator, Mustafa al-Zahrani. When asked if Irina had been to his home, the sheikh replied with a categorical denial. He stated that he had never invited the TV show participants to his home and had no personal contact with them outside of official events. The sheikh's lawyers presented documents confirming his presence at a business meeting at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel on the evening of Irina's disappearance. The documents included a bill for dinner for 8 people, hotel surveillance camera footage, and waiters' testimonies. The evidence looked convincing, but Russian experts noted that the alibi only covered the period from 7 to 11 p.m. The time after midnight, when, according to the medical report, the murder took place, remained unconfirmed. Attempts to question Officer Maher al-Khulaifi, who, according to unofficial information, supervised the guest house at the sheikh's villa, were unsuccessful. Officially, no such person existed in the structure of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Requests for information about an employee with that name were met with the response that the personal data of civil servants is not subject to disclosure to foreign representatives. Mustafa al-Zahrani was never found. Al-Mazaya Media stated that he had resigned of his own accord immediately after the end of the project and left the country. Passport services confirmed his departure to Saudi Arabia, but further traces were lost. The Saudi authorities refused to provide information about his whereabouts, citing the protection of citizens' privacy. The investigation, which formally continued, did not yield any new results. Major Al-Khalifa periodically informed the consulate about ongoing activities, but did not provide any specifics. Requests for interim results received standard responses about the need to comply with procedural norms and the confidentiality of the investigation. The Russian leadership attempted to raise the issue to the diplomatic level. Russian ambassador to Bahrain. Anatoly Romanov met with the kingdom's foreign minister, but no constructive dialogue was achieved. The Bahraini side insisted that the investigation was being conducted objectively and that outside interference was unacceptable. International human rights organizations limited themselves to formal statements. Amnesty International included Irina Selivanova's case in its annual report on human rights violations in the Persian Gulf countries, but took no practical action. Human Rights Watch sent a request to the Bahraini authorities, but received no response. Irina's parents tried to hire private investigators, but were refused. Several international agencies said they did not work in Bahrain due to local legal restrictions. The few private investigators who agreed to take on the case demanded astronomical sums and did not guarantee results. The Selivanov family's attempts to obtain compensation through international courts also failed. The European Court of Human Rights refused to hear the case because Bahrain is not a signatory to the European Convention. The International Criminal Court stated that it had no jurisdiction in the matter. The Russian authorities limited themselves to diplomatic protests. The Russian Foreign Ministry sent several notes to the Bahraini government. but the matter did not go beyond formal procedures. No economic or political sanctions were imposed. Cooperation between the countries in other areas continued as usual. The media quickly lost interest in the story. The last publications about the Irina Selivanova case appeared 3 months after the body was found in regional publications in the Central Federal District. Federal channels did not even mention the murder in their crime news reports. The topic became taboo without any official explanation of the reasons. 6 months later, the Bahraini authorities announced that the case had been closed due to lack of evidence. The official conclusion stated that the Russian citizen's death occurred under unclear circumstances, possibly as a result of an accident or a crime committed by unidentified persons. The investigation materials were transferred to the archives with the label "Secret." The Russian consulate received notification of the closure of the case, along with a request to collect the deceased's personal belongings. However, when consular officials arrived at the specified location, they were informed that the belongings had been disposed of in accordance with sanitary requirements. No documents regarding the disposal were provided. Irina's body was cremated at the state crematorium in Manama without her parents' consent. The official reason given was the need to comply with sanitary and epidemiological standards in a hot climate. The urn with her ashes was handed over to the Russian consulate only 2 months after the cremation, which ruled out the possibility of a second examination. Her parents received the urn with their daughter's ashes in Voronezh in October. The farewell ceremony was held in a small circle of relatives and friends. The local authorities did not organize any official memorial events. Irina's grave in the Komentarnovsky Cemetery was left without the state honors due to victims of crimes abroad. Elena Selivanova continues to seek justice through public organizations, but her efforts have not been supported. The memorial fund she created for her daughter exists only on paper. There are virtually no donations, and no state funding is provided. The only result has been a small memorial plaque at the university where Irina studied. Al-Mazaya Media continues to operate under the new name Gulf Culture Productions. Projects for young women from post-Soviet countries are still being announced on social media. The conditions for participation and the prize fund have remained virtually unchanged. There is no information about the fate of Irina Selivanova in the promotional materials. Sheikh Salman ibn Fahd al-Munawir has expanded his charitable activities. Last year, he opened a cultural center for young people in Manama and received a state award for his contribution to the development of international cooperation. His name is regularly mentioned in the local press in connection with educational initiatives. The facts indicate that Irina Selivanova was a victim of human trafficking under the guise of a cultural program. The TV show was a way of selecting young women for wealthy clients. Irina's victory turned out to be not a reward, but a sentence. Her beauty, education, and defenselessness made her the perfect victim for those accustomed to buying people. The murder occurred after Irina tried to resist or escape. She was tortured, raped, and beaten to break her will, but she continued to fight. In the end, the criminals decided to get rid of their uncontrollable victim. They dumped her body like trash, hoping that the desert would hide the traces of their crime. The system for protecting Russian citizens abroad proved completely ineffective. Consular officials had no real tools to investigate the crime. Diplomatic protests remained a formality. Russian law enforcement agencies made no attempt to investigate the murder of their own citizen. The Bahraini authorities demonstrated their willingness to cover up the crimes of influential citizens. The investigation was a sham, designed to create the appearance of work. All key witnesses either disappeared or were deported. Evidence was destroyed under various pretexts. Corruption permeated the entire system, from rank-and-file police officers to senior officials. The international community chose to turn a blind eye to the obvious murder. Economic interests proved more important than the life of a young woman. Trade relations with wealthy oil monarchies are worth more than justice for the victims of their crimes. Human rights remain a mere declaration when it comes to real money. Irina Selivanova wasn't killed by random criminals, but by members of an organized group specializing in human trafficking. Her death was the result of her resistance to a system that turns young women into commodities for wealthy perverts. The killers remain unpunished and continue their activities. Irina's story is not an exception, but a pattern. Dozens of young women from poor countries disappear every year in the wealthy monarchies of the Persian Gulf. Some become sex slaves, others die while trying to resist. Their bodies are found in the desert or dumped in the sea. No investigations are conducted, and the guilty parties are not punished. A 24-year-old student from Voronezh dreamed of becoming a journalist and telling the world the truth. Her own death became a story that the world chose not to hear. Irina Selivanova was raped, beaten to death, and thrown into a river by wealthy sadists who knew they would go unpunished. Her murder is a condemnation of a system that values money over human life.